Thank you. We've got a fantastic panel with us today who'll be reflecting on the role of leaders in fostering employee engagements, and will be sharing best practice tips and insights. So I'd like to welcome our esteemed panel. We've got Melissa Muirhead, founder of the Great Work Lab, who is joining us actually from New Zealand. We've got Bruce Bratley, founder and CEO of First Mile. And we've got Jade Oliver Morris, HR and Shared Services Director from Smart Solutions. Welcome. So just to set some context for the discussion that we're going to have this morning, this is a critical time for the waste and resources sector. We're facing challenges, but also significant opportunities ahead. We need to transition to a more circular economy, support our own and other sectors to reduce carbon emissions, and this is all whilst meeting growing customer expectations and delivering excellent services. So really no small ask. So to do this, we need to make sure that our workforce is engaged and ready to make an impact. And this is where some of the challenge lies. In a recent CIWM survey, 60% of the respondents said that they were struggling to recruit staff. The pandemic has changed the way that we work, and we're operating differently. Technology is also evolving at a pace that we've never seen before, and our workforce is absolutely central to this transition. So how do we take them on this journey? Let's turn to our panel for some insights. So turning to you first, Melissa, welcome. Why is employee engagement so important?
Well, it's kind of the number one impact on whether your business or your organization performs well. And if you look at the state of the global workforce, we've only got 23% of our workforce are actually engaged. And by that, I mean, you've got people who care, who show up to work, enjoying what they're doing, coming up with new ideas, trying to solve problems. They're the people that will put in the discretionary effort. They're also the people that are least likely to leave, because an engaged person needs at least 31% more of an increase in salary to even consider looking outside. But it's only 23%. And if you look at Europe, it's actually 13%. Europe is the lowest engaged region in the world. And then you've got 59% of the world, which is kind of don't really care. They're emotionally detached. They show up to get their paycheck. This is your quiet quitting. And then we've got 18% that just hate their job, that are really negative, and it affects everything, and they talk really negative about it. So when you look at those statistics, Gallup have worked out that it costs our global economy $8.8 trillion a year, or in other words, 9% of global GDP, which is massive. And there's this correlation between the higher you've got a team of engaged people, the better your business performs. So for me, this is not a soft, fluffy thing at all. This is probably the most critical factor in creating a high-performance organizational business, no matter what sector you're in.
My goodness, those statistics are shocking, aren't they? I can't believe that the level of engagement is so small. Wow. I'm sure, Bruce, in your organisation, you've got an incredibly highly engaged workforce. Why is it important to First Mile?
It's work in progress, but it's never ending. But thanks. I mean, my starting point is the same as Melissa's, but it's slightly more agricultural description. You spend a fortune on your people, so you're better off, or it's a good idea to get the most out of them, really. And it's good for you, good for the business, but also good for them. And it's really important, I think, for three reasons. Happy people are more productive generally. And certainly at First Mile, we've seen that. So making people happier and make sure they've got a good environment and all the tools they need to do the job and engaged around their work. They provide better service for customers. We're a customer-based organisation, as many people are in the waste industry, customer-centric. And it's not just about them reading from a script or doing a good job. They need to be empowered to go beyond what it says on the job description. A recent example of that is one of our people in the customer services team were talking to a customer about a service issue, and they were very upset because she was looking after both of her ill parents. And Sarah in our team took it upon herself to send a nice bouquet of flowers to say sorry and hope her parents were better. And that you can't write a rule book for. That's just about having engaged staff, and this happens all the time in First Mile. And then we've obviously got a very happy customer, and makes the whole team feel pleased about working for the company. It costs you less churn, easier to recruit, and everyone's doing a better job. Obviously, I've mentioned the customers, but they're also working in a safer way, that understand what they're doing. We work around the public a lot, so that's really important. So being engaged and really linking in to the purpose of the organisation is just really key across all areas.
Fantastic. So it's really important for culture, which I know you're going to talk about shortly. Excellent. Jade, what about smart solutions?
Yeah, so for us, we're a service and labour provider. So, our customer are the key players in the waste sector, those key organisations. And it's therefore really important that our staff are engaged and are delivering the service of our client, but also of smart solutions as well. So we work a lot collaboratively to ensure that our staff are engaged, and that is across the board, really, especially where we're operating facilities, that we've got individuals that are working both for us and for other organisations. So making sure that there's consistency, there's fairness, that drives engagement. That quality piece is really critical to driving engagement, particularly where you've got a workforce that there's lots of different cultures, working together alongside each other. We have one of our key metrics is looking at performance as a way to engage our staff. We have a system called Smart Score Plus. And we utilise that to encourage individuals, to have greater awareness of the waste industry and how a facility is operating, but also to try and be the best performer in the team. And it does two things, really. It rewards those top performers, so they get something back for being the best. But for those individuals that aren't quite the best yet, it identifies some key learning areas for them. And so they're then invested in to give them training to allow them to become the best. And that drives engagement as well, to know that those individuals that aren't quite performing as well have tools and resources available to them to get there.
Fantastic. That sounds like a great performance tool that you've got there and are utilising with your staff. Lovely. So we've talked a bit about why it's so important, but what does best practice look like? And I'm going to turn to Melissa here, because your experience covers a wide range of sectors, doesn't it? Outside of the waste and resources sector, I should say.
It does. So right now, obviously, I have my own company and I work with a lot of organisations around the world. But before I did that too, I spent nearly a decade in Heineken. So I've got quite a lot of experience in that particular company as well. But one of the best practice examples I wanted to talk about was actually, and this was within Heineken, and this was around actually looking at first-time leaders. Because if you look at the data, 70% of whether an employee is engaged or not directly relates to their immediate manager. And what happens in organizations, we tend to have, larger teams with new managers at that front line. So it's often a huge part of your organization that's been managed by someone who's just been promoted into that management role. And that's probably the most difficult leadership time of your leadership journey, because you're still very operational and suddenly you're expected to be doing different things. And how your manager operates is going to determine 70% of whether you're engaged, you don't care, or you hate your job. So it's hugely impactful. So what we did, this was within one of the countries within Heineken, is we developed a leadership development program that was really around helping these first-time leaders understand the impact they had on their people and the employee engagement, and what were the skills and tools they needed to do that. And what's really interesting, I find, is that these new leaders often have no idea around how impactful they are. So they were horrified and dumbfounded when they understood that actually so much of how people feel relates to them, because they're like, I'm not that important, I'm not the real manager, the managers are the people more senior. And actually it's not, it's the person you most report to. So actually putting a program in place around clarity around what does it mean to be a leader, what does it mean to be a growth mindset leader, that's a piece I'm super passionate about. What are the priorities? How do you organize your time so you're actually being a leader and prioritizing your people rather than prioritizing tasks and things? And most importantly, how do you be a good coach? How do you have great conversations with your people? How do you have career conversations, development conversations? How do you give feedback? Because these are the things that we know from all of the data out there make the highest impact on employee engagement. And we've found that by doing these programs, we get a corresponding improvement in the engagement of these teams following that.
Fantastic. That's really insightful, Melissa. And I'm sure it's leadership across the board, right the way from a supervisory level right up to chief exec as well. Wow, can make a substantial impact. Bruce, I'm sure you've got some fantastic insights on leadership. I think it's almost 20 years since you've been at the helm and founded First Mile. So what's your experience of how leaders can foster employee engagement?
So I suppose my job is, one of my jobs at First Mile is to empower the team, our team, we call them First Milers, to activate the values that we have through our culture, because values are just words on a piece of paper unless you've got people activating them. And our three core values are love the planet, we're a purpose-led business, so we're trying to have a positive impact on the planet. Amaze customers, we'd be nowhere without them, and I've given an example of how we amazed a customer earlier. And then the activation piece is through the core value, which is be one team, which is around the people. And those three, we recently got asked to prioritise them in a tender. It's quite hard because the three of them work in a very sort of synergistic manner. But from a leader's perspective, my role is really to make sure that the people are empowered to deliver the values and activate the culture across the business. And I guess, I can go into metrics and the things we're doing, but I think from a leader's perspective, the key thing that I do is spend a lot of time every day engaging with people through different forums throughout the business, from drivers right through to the senior management team, and making sure that they're also empowering their people. And I think the key skill that leaders probably forget that you have to deploy when nurturing an empowered workforce is to listen, because you won't find out what's going on unless you listen, and listen carefully and listen well. We do the broadcasting piece, we do the town halls, that sort of thing, but you do need to spend, I'd say, 80 to 90% of your time listening to what people actually want, how they feel, where they're struggling, what's working well. And then sort of that is, I guess, my view of what a good leaders should be doing to empower a workforce.
Bruce, just to drill into that a little bit, your workforce is quite diverse. You've got frontline services, and then you've got management structures. Do your engagement techniques differ depending on the role of the employee?
Not at the sort of top level, which is listening, but in terms of how we sort of have operational staff, if you like, and we do have different engagement tools to the office, but we also have some common ones. So, for example, we survey all of our staff using an app called Winning Temp to see how they're feeling, to check the temperature of the organisation. We survey everybody every week, and that includes all operational staff, all office-based, from the lowest paid to the highest paid person in the organisation. So that's something that happens on a regular basis. We also have a benefits package called Ben, is the app we use, and there's lots of different benefits that go into that. You get an extra bonus if it's your birthday, or if your manager wants to reward you, or if you've got a work anniversary, and that's across the entire piece. But then for the operational staff, we have quarterly awards meetings, driver of the quarter. And then in the offices, we have a monthly stand-up town hall, which the drivers and operational staff are welcome to come to. A few do, but not many. But the driver of the quarter is much more about announcing the winners of the awards that we have, and also saying what standards drivers are going to be, whether they're gold, silver or bronze standards. So there are different tools for engagement, but some of them are common, some of them are a bit more specific, but they're all aligned broadly in the same direction. And the culture is slightly different in an office as it is operationally, where you've got mobile workers and site-based workers, but fundamentally it's the same. And we've got different ethnicities and different nationalities in the business in both office and operational staff, and communicating can be a challenge. I mean, we've got 25 nationalities working the business with 28 different ethnicities. So it is a very diverse workforce to communicate with, but that's what makes it good fun.
Absolutely. Jade, I can see you nodding there as well. In terms of the Smart Solutions workforce, do you have to flex your styles of communication depending on the staff members, and how do you approach a diverse workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was nodding away to what Bruce was saying there, because we're very much sort of in the same boat in terms of that real diverse workforce. But we also have sort of a key differential, sort of two groups in the main that I kind of put our employees in that we've got a flexible employee contingent and a permanent employee contingent. And we do have to really think kind of carefully about how we communicate effectively with those groups, because they're working very differently. And then there's further breakdown within that, again, to that point Bruce made. If we look at our permanent employees, some of those will be based on a singular facility, and they manage the operational function of that facility and the workforce there. But then we have other permanent employees who look after a number of facilities across quite a large geography. So just within that singular group, there's then again smaller pockets and ways to communicate. And in terms of engaging with those individuals, holding kind of events or singular day events or activities aren't necessarily going to work for those who are on the road a lot, but they're also not necessarily going to work in a waste facility where, you know, from a health and safety perspective, we can't do things that we might do in an office environment, for example. So there's lots of things to consider in terms of how we deliver communication, how we deliver engagement strategies. But I would absolutely agree with Bruce that the top level, that top level strategy in terms of what we're looking to achieve and what we want to get from engagement, it is the same across the board, but how we deliver that is definitely different and multifaceted.
So similar principles, but actually the way that it's executed is tailored to your workforce.
Yes,
yeah,
completely.
Some great insights. So leading on from that, what would you say are some of the strategies for overcoming common obstacles to employee engagement? So remote work is one of the challenges I personally have felt, particularly during the pandemic, but also it could be things like limited resources, etc. I'm going to go to Melissa first. Perhaps you can give us some insights from other sectors about those challenges and how you overcome them.
Yeah, because look, I think these are challenges across the board. I think everyone's facing, you know, all of these issues at the moment. COVID kind of threw up how we work in many ways, and we're still trying to navigate what that looks like, and all of that. Look, I always like going back to the data, because I always think that's super important. And one of the things, Gallup have just put a new book out called Culture Shock, and they said if there's one thing that we can do that has the biggest impact on employee engagement over any other factor apart from the leader, but one thing that leader can do, it's to have one meaningful conversation a week with your people. And it doesn't have to be a formal sit down one-on-one. It can be virtual. It can be down on the shop floor, working next to someone for 5 minutes, but actually make it meaningful. And to take that down to a next level, one of the things that I've really noticed, particularly in some of the clients I work with, we're not very good at feedback. And I say that in two ways. So whether there's not enough feedback for improvement, but is also there's not enough positive feedback. Because the reality is we need 5 pieces of positive feedback to be able to handle 1 piece of negative feedback, because that's the way relationships are. And this is not just at work, this is with your spouses, with your kids, everything. We need 5 good things for every 1 piece of constructive or feedback for improvement. And often we're not very good at being able to deliver that, or we just say, oh, thanks for that, and we think that's feedback. Whereas actually even taking 5 minutes to go, and I always love the COIN model, which is context, observation, impact, next steps, which is, hey, look, in the meeting yesterday, I observed you doing ... and the impact was that it had blah, blah, blah. Keep it going. That's awesome. Something like that is so much more meaningful than, hey, thanks, great job. And that is all you need to have to count as a meaningful conversation. And that makes people feel cared for. It makes them feel, well, I'm noticed, I'm acknowledged for what I'm doing. And this has a disproportionate positive impact on engaging people. And think about yourself, for all of us, when we've had someone that's had that type of conversation with us, and how does it make us feel? Because at the end of the day, our performance, our culture, our level of engagement is determined how we feel more than any other factor. So that for me is really critical. And I think it's something we can all do regardless of how we work, whether it's remote, on the shop floor. We can figure out ways to have that 5-minute conversation, but it's meaningful.
It's fantastic tips there. I'm already logging. Was it the 5-to-1 ratio there?
Yeah.
I need to reflect on my own relationship, I think, for that. How long does it take to build a sort of a culture of feedback? Because I know it can be quite a learning process for staff to go through to really make it meaningful.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is around psychological safety, which means people feel safe to give and receive feedback, because ideally it should go every way. And I think, there's some really interesting case studies like Netflix, for example. They talk a lot about their very open candor, culture where everyone is expected to be giving really honest feedback to everyone else. But there needs to be safety. So you need to be able to feel safe that you're not going to be punished if you do that. There needs to be that level of trust, which is why, it is important to have that balance of great feedback as well as to balance when it is feedback for improvement. And it totally is a journey. And, all of us are our individuals, and feedback can feel very confronting. We can feel very vulnerable about it. So it is, but it's a bit like a muscle as well. We go to the gym and we lift weights and we get more and more stronger. It's the same with this. So it's around, how do you make it safe? How do you give people the skills to give feedback? And how do you make sure it goes every way, across, up, down, that it's not just leader down to the employee? If you want a feedback culture, a really robust one, it needs to be everyone.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. Making it a habit is really important. So it's just ingrained into every day. I'll come to Bruce now. At First Mile, are there any sort of common obstacles that you've faced in terms of employee engagement and approaches that you've taken to improve it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think following on from Melissa, and absolutely agree with that. I think we've got, and conveniently all begin with an M. I mean, for us, it's money, meet, and measure. And we do regular meetings, town halls, communications, videos, drive of the quarter. And that really bridges the gap across different languages, nationalities. We try different medias all the time, and it's all about building people to be one team. I work on the shop floor, I go on rounds, I'm very visible in terms of the business. So that meeting piece can't be underestimated, and Melissa put it brilliantly. I think money is really important. We're all financially constrained, both the businesses and employees. You cannot buy employee engagement. You can use money to help you get there, but just paying people more money will not get them, turn them into an engaged workforce. So money's a constraint, but the money you do have, use it wisely. I mean, we have drivers on different pay grades depending on how engaged they are and how measurements of things like safety and service. They get paid more if they're doing a better job and they're more engaged, and they're all interrelated. So use your money wisely. And then measurement is a key element of it, because if you're not measuring it, you can't see if you're improving or not. And some of the tools we use for that are we're sort of, if you like, benchmarked. We've got B Corporation at the start of this year, and one of the stakeholder groups for B Corporation is around employees. And we scored very well in there, and that's a 2-year scoring cycle, but we scored well in there because we paid a living wage, we have very strong health and safety policies, and we're measuring employee satisfaction, paying bonuses, etc., full-time contracts, development opportunities. So that's sort of like a once every 2 years, so it's not that dynamic. But the more dynamic measures are employee net promoter score. If you don't do that, whereas ours is high at 42, measure that, see where you're getting to. Glassdoor, if you've never heard of it, you will have a Glassdoor, probably from disgruntled past employees. Ours is 4.5 out of 5. Check that out. And then also, if you're a customer basis, a customer service company, see what work on your Trustpilot or Google reviews. Ours is 4.7 for Trustpilot out of 5. And if you haven't got an engaged workforce, you're not going to have happy customers. The two are very closely interrelated. So it's an indirect measurement of how your workforce is doing. You know, if they don't like their job and if they're in that disgruntled element that Melissa's talking about, you're probably going to get a 3 or a 3.5. You're not going to get above 4 unless you've got engaged people and they're really actually like working for you. So I think those are the sort of 3 areas that I suggest people have a look at. And, you know, money's going to run out quickly with inflation. So you better get on the case if you're not already.
I like that. So money, meet and measure. But also I was hearing about that you really prioritise transparency as well in what you're doing. So fantastic to hear. Jade, what about smart solutions? Any sort of common obstacles that around employee engagement that you tackle? And also, I'm quite keen to hear about health and safety culture as well, and whether there are any top tips there around employee engagement.
Sure. Yeah. So I can touch on both of those, and picking up on the point Melissa was making in regards to feedback. We've been on a bit of a journey in regards to getting employee feedback and to be able to utilise that to kind of move things forward. And one of the key things I learned in implementing feedback metrics and surveys, as an example, is don't expect to get usable data in the broad sense until the 3rd survey is out. So if we're sort of starting with a new business, for example, we've got a new workforce that we're placing with our client. I learned that first survey is it's new, right? So they're getting a survey. They've maybe they've never been surveyed before by an employer. It's new to them. Melissa mentioned about consequences. They might be a little bit worried, or what's going to happen if I say something here? You know, what's going to be the repercussion of that? So then you do the 2nd survey, and the 2nd survey then will be the sort of they know that there's no repercussion, that it's been a positive experience, word has got round, so you get a lot more engagement in that 2nd survey, and a bit more of an outpouring of information. So it's only really then by the 3rd survey that you do that you can actually start to see if there's actually been any progress, if you've implementing anything off the back of the 1st and the 2nd. That 3rd survey is when you should start to see some progress, hopefully being made on the things that you've implemented as a result. So I wanted to share that because I thought that was a really interesting point and worth considering if you are looking to implement surveys or looking to start to get feedback as part of an engagement strategy. One of the obstacles we face with our flexible employees in the main, who are sort of our frontline staff, a lot of them don't have smartphones, and everybody is wanting to evolve, move forward with technology, make things as slick and efficient as possible. Sometimes that person-to-person interaction can be the most effective, as Melissa pointed out. And within my team, we have an operational business. We have operational business partners, so they're sort of separate from the day-to-day operational managers. But those individuals are an enhancement to that experience for our flexible employees. So they'll go out to our facilities. They'll spend the day working on the picking line with them, working alongside them, doing the same job. And it does a number of things. It allows us to kind of pick up information and general conversation that we wouldn't necessarily get. They'll speak to them in their first language. So that's really important as well. People feel more comfortable and they'll open up a little bit more. It allows us to pick up some safeguarding metrics. So just talking about safety there. So from a modern slavery perspective, it allows us to pick up any indicators that we might be concerned about. But those operational business partners are also trained from a safety perspective and a sort of specialist in the waste sector to be able to identify and give tangible data and feedback to our client on any areas that we might want to give back on the safety perspective. So how much materials coming through, the picking technique, and they can give that tangible feedback and training as well, then implement that with our clients. So it's a really good sort of system of flow through. I think it's key to have not necessarily just managers, but if you've got that resource to put additional staff in that are sort of targeted at looking at these areas, you know, that's their focus. They're not trying to run the facility. They're not trying to do all those other things that come with being a manager and a leader. They're there to focus on some of the key points of the staff, of those individuals, employees that are driving that work forward, and keeping that engagement as a top priority.
So you're really tailoring your approach to your workforce there, aren't you?
Yeah, I think for us, it's trying to also break that mold of we're not a recruitment agency. I think that's the key thing. I think recruitment agencies are often seen as bums on seats, you know, give their client the staff that they need. And that's the end of the purpose of that organisation. And for us, it's so much more than that. You know, our workforce, their employees, they're not agency workers. And therefore, we want to give them a rounded experience of being an employee and having that engagement with us. And as Bruce pointed out, if we've got happy staff, then our client's going to be happy as well, because they're going to be performing well, they're going to be delivering a good service. So it's mutually beneficial to work in that way.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a really insightful conversation. We've got 2 minutes left to the end of the panel. And I'd really like the audience to have a little bit of takeaway advice from each of the panel members. I've already got a huge number of different pointers, from 5 to 1 on the kind of the feedback, to money, meet and measure, and to tailoring advice. So I'll go to Bruce first. What's your one piece of advice for our audience to take away?
Listen to your team and your people and find your staff moments that matter. Everyone will have lots of different ideas, but one of them will rise to the top. Deliver that, then tell your team that you've delivered it, get the feedback, then they'll get confidence and give you another idea of what can be improved to make it more engaging. And don't try and eat the elephant in all at once. You can do it in an iterative way. And if you keep feeding back with transparency, they'll get more confidence and they'll go on a journey with you.
Fantastic. So moments that matter and don't eat the elephant. Melissa?
For me, it's invest in your leaders at all levels. Make sure they have the skills and capabilities to have those right conversations with their people. That's the biggest investment with the best return you can possibly make.
Fantastic. Best return on investment. And Jade, over to you.
Have an overarching strategy for what you want to get by engaging with employees, but really think about how you can tailor it to individual groups within your organisation and what's best for them.
Panel, you've been fantastic. I've got so many things to take away from this, and I'm sure the audience has been writing down all of these top tips. So thank you very much, and we'll hand back to the main audience now. Thank you.